recognize the distinguished ranking member of the committee, Ms. DeLauro, for her remarks.
Thank you very much for yielding. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. I'm very proud to serve with Chairman Rogers, Chairman Cole, Ranking Member Meng, and all of the subcommittee members. And I also want to share my appreciation for the subcommittee staff on both sides of the aisle. And in particular, I want to call out Bob Bonner, Nora Faye Cobb, Jamie Wise for their work. I oppose the bill before us today, which defunds federal law enforcement and threatens public safety, continues Republican senseless attacks on America's scientific supremacy, promotes waste, fraud, and abuse, and hurts the middle class and working class in our country today. We are in the middle of a cost of living crisis. President Trump promised to lower costs on day one, but instead, he and the Republicans are making the cost of living crisis even worse. The big ugly bill is handing massive tax breaks to billionaires and the biggest corporations, while Americans continue to struggle with the cost of basic necessities. And while President Trump brags about the money he is siphoning out of Americans' pockets and from small businesses through his chaotic and senseless trade tariff agenda. Today, we are considering another House Republican bill which will raise costs for struggling American families, gut support for rural communities, undermine our efforts to ensure our trading partners play by the rules. We are holding this markup in a completely unprecedented time, with Congress's authority being challenged by a lawless administration. Since taking office, President Trump's administration has stolen resources appropriated by the Congress for programs and services across the federal government, including several in this bill that help to lower costs for middle class and working families, keep America safe and our economy fair, and ensure America is at the forefront of scientific innovation and discovery. President Trump has frozen programs that provide seniors, veterans, rural families, and people with disabilities with the skills and tools that they need to access the internet, as well as emergency funding to help the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, procure weather radars and satellites that help create life-saving forecasts. Over $4.5 billion in Department of Justice grant money, including COPS grants, Office of Violence Against Women grants, has been frozen, stolen from the communities that are counting on this funding to improve their own law enforcement capabilities, funding that supports reentry initiatives and violence prevention, that helps prevent hate crimes, provide services for crime victims, and support underserved communities. Stealing this funding makes the American people less safely and more likely to become victims of crime. They have fired hundreds of scientists, including scientists who monitor extreme weather and who do advance our scientific goals in space. Why on earth are we forfeiting America's scientific supremacy? What would you do differently if you were America's adversary and wanted to undermine everything that made us a superpower? They have turned the Department of Justice into the president's personal law firm, wielding law enforcement power to silence and intimidate critics of the administration and its agenda, and to protect President Trump's criminal allies. For all of these frozen and terminated programs that Congress enacted and appropriated funding, we appropriated funding. It is the law of the land. They are substituting Congress's decisions and judgments with their own, turning Article 1 of the Constitution on its head. These cuts are not numbers on a page. They are not only felt in Washington, D.C., they affect all of our constituents. At the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, the Trump administration has dismissed National Weather Service forecasters and other critical employees, endangering American communities. As a result of funding and employee cuts within NOAA, we have fewer forecasters, fewer weather balloon launches, and less reliable weather data. and forecasts that families, businesses, and state and local governments rely on to stay safe and to stay open. In Connecticut, with the National Weather Service, has been critical for saving lives through everything from wildfires to visits to blizzards to floods. Bill Turner, Connecticut State Emergency Management Director, said, and I quote, "It's a very fragile house of cards right now, and we need them to continue. It could be catastrophic in a lot of ways for our states if they go down the path of stopping the National Weather Service and their functionality," end quote. Weather forecasts are not waste, fraud, and abuse. And I ask my colleagues, did anyone come to your town halls and complain that the Weather Service has too many meteorologists, too many people issuing advisories, watches, and warnings on severe storms? I don't think so. I know the chairman of the full committee has worked to impress upon the administration the importance of weather monitoring institutions in Oklahoma. But National Weather Service offices are needed across our country. We cannot leave critical weather monitoring capabilities to the benevolence of the president. That is why funding is appropriated by the Congress, not the administration. Unfortunately, this bill doubles down on Republicans' pro-billionaire, pro-corporations, anti-science, and anti-rule of law agenda. This bill turns its back on the Republicans' promises to rural communities, underfunding programs to create jobs and revive economically distressed communities, especially in rural America. While the president declares a trade war against our allies and biggest trading partners that will raise prices, this bill cuts funding for the International Trade Administration by nearly 30%, severely hindering our government's ability to fight other countries' unfair trade practices and help America's businesses expand their access to international markets. This bill makes families, women, children, and all of our communities less safe. They slash funding for the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Forces, and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Explosives, limiting federal efforts to help state and local law enforcement combat gun violence, drug trafficking, and organized crime. By slashing these legal services, violence against women, juvenile justice grants, community violence intervention prevention grants, hate crimes prevention grants, and other resources that prevent violence. And why on earth does this bill slash the Department of Justice's Office of the Inspector General by 30%? What are you afraid of? What might be uncovered in Pam Bondi's Department of Justice? Does this administration want to eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse or not? Our government's inspector generals are absolutely critical, nonpartisan offices that help Congress and the American people eliminate and prevent fraud and corruption, and why this administration has directly undermined and even removed over a dozen of these officers across our government. Americans expect few things of their country: a fair economy, safety for their families, and respect for the rule of law. Consequences for corruption. This bill fails to deliver on every one of those fronts. Americans cannot keep up with the ever-increasing cost of living, but instead of working with Democrats to make investments can help lower their costs, keep Americans safe, and our economy fair, Republicans have put forward a bill that favors billionaires and corporations, a bill that does not fight waste, fraud, and abuse, but embraces it. I cannot support this bill, and I yield back.